I'm hoping to build a network of studios, a network of educative for hubs, a network of cinemas, which, we at home have, but in Africa, they aren't abundant.
It is such an honor to be able to sit down and talk to some of the leaders in efforts to help the continent of Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the issues today is climate. And I am so pleased to be able to talk to Secretary Michael Regan of EPA and also the Albas, Idris and Sabrina Elba. So thank you so much, all of you, for taking time. Mr. Secretary, could you talk to me about why we are focusing in on sub-Saharan Africa in this moment and climate change in particular?
Absolutely, April, and thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be with you. During the President's African Leaders Summit, he pledged that you would see both the continent of Africa and the United States of America come together as a global community to begin to tackle the climate crisis. And there were just so many issues that we're seeing here domestically and on the continent that are similar. So what we decided to do was we would visit the continent and explore how we exchange technical information, how we exchange, innovation and entrepreneurship. It's sort of similar as to what we've been doing here domestically with the Environmental Justice Tour. We know that local communities know their communities best. There have been solutions at the community level for decades, if not generations. And now it's time to match innovation and technology and resources to those solutions. So we're excited about it. I have to say that we were going to Ghana and Nigeria and some other countries, but I met the Elbas during the African Leaders Summit. And Idris challenged us to not only go to the countries that we have existing relationships with, like Ghana. EPA has had a relationship with Ghana for over a decade, but challenged us to go off the beaten path to countries like Sierra Leone. And so we talked about the mutual interest of jobs, economic development, agriculture, and climate. And we have this wonderful trip planned together.
So Idris, tell me about this challenge. Why did you challenge him to do that? Because we understand that past presidents have gone to various countries and newer countries are coming in each time a president goes. But why the challenge, understanding that they were expanding their footprint in other countries?
Look, I think the road most traveled is obviously the one that people go down, and that's fine, that works. But I think Michael said that we're talking about innovation. How do we innovate? How do we become a first? And that means, facing regions in Africa, partnerships in Africa that are less traveled. And I think it will more amplify the administration's ambitions to strengthen ties between America and Africa by going to places that are less traveled. I think that shows a lot of character, it shows a lot of depth, and it shows that the road that we have is a long one as opposed to a shorter one with, higher yields perhaps. I know that people are often wondering, what does Africa and America, why does America want to strengthen ties with Africa? Well, the largest community of the diaspora is in America. It's also in Europe. And so that connection between America and Africa has already started on country. So I think it's important to now hear the voices of the diaspora, not only in country, but also on the continent, and find ways to strengthen them. And as Administrator said, there are things we can share with each other. And we are talking largely to a young population. Africans, median age is 18, 19. So when we talk about future-proofing, then, we're talking about mobilizing the youth.
Take us to your father's home country of Sierra Leone. We've heard about it before through former presidents and the strides that made with historic presidents like Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. But talk to us about your father's country and why the emphasis on going to a country now less traveled by American presidents.
Well, one I will say it's one that sort of lives in a little bit of a selfish play here. I'm half Sierra Leonean by my dad. My mom's Ghanaian. Sab's mom from Somalia. Another place well less traveled.
Yeah.
But Sierra Leone has seen its fair share of adversity, right? From civil war to two pandemics, and the country has seen enough of its share of sort of uphill struggles, but is still a young, vibrant, beautiful part of West Africa. I'm very proud of it. And the narrative there makes people shy away from it. So for us, when speaking to Mr. Regan, was talking about how his ambitions, some of his journey, some of the historical wins where he himself was like, I'm going to go to a place less well traveled, and he could really relate to what I was saying. So that's why I'd like to go to invite them to come to Sierra Leone, because the difficulties there do not define its future. Okay, its past. It does not mean that it cannot be a case study of what a good relationship between Africa and America could be. And that's why.
And you said something so poignant and something pivotal as well. Partnership, relationship, not necessarily America coming in, taking over. And that's what we understand the AU, the African Union, does not want. They want to work together, not America coming in and just taking over. And Secretary Regan, talk to me about that piece. How do you keep the partnership versus a takeover when you're going on a mission to help and to work with, particularly on issues of climate change?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. And, I think I have some personal experience. Obviously I'm a proud graduate of a historically Black college, North Carolina A&T State University. A lot of my professors at A&T were African. So when we talk about some of the agricultural techniques and education that I received in some of my early training, I received that from the continent. I think that we look at our partners in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, in other countries as equals. And this is about nurturing intellectual capacity. I love it when I hear the Elbas talk about, this is not about aid. This is about an equal exchange, trying to do what the president has challenged us to do, which is the most pressing challenge this world faces in climate change cannot be solved alone by America. We have to reach out to our global partners. And so that intellectual exchange, nurturing that youth that Africa has, that desire, that hunger, that intrinsic motivation, all of those things with respect, equal partnership. And that's exactly why I'm excited about this trip and the authentic nature by which this came together. It was a conversation with me and the Elbas during the African Leaders Summit in just December, not too long ago, and understanding what the Elbas Hope Foundation wanted to achieve and the mission orientation. Listen, we're metrics driven, we're results driven. You have a group of people going to the continent, not just for a photo op, but going to establish and continue very serious partnerships.
Mrs. Elba, your husband, we already know who he is and what he does. He's a heartthrob to many. I'm just going. We watch him, and I know one person in particular, Lonnie Love, who just loves you to death.
What's up, Regan?
Yeah. But your husband's a heartthrob, but his passion is now pulling the White House to move on Africa. That says a lot. What do you think about that? And what do you want to see that's tangible from this trip and the other trips this year?
I mean, look, I think firstly, it says a lot about Idris, and it's one of the main reasons we actually connected as deeply as we did, because we're both first-generation Africans, and our love for the continent has bled into every part of our relationship. But I think, we really value the importance of collaboration. And when we had that initial conversation with the administrator, we instantly realized that he has that same core value about the continent that we do, that it's not America coming into the continent looking at it like a way to to simply have a one-sided relationship or to just provide aid. It's actually looking at it as how it's mutually beneficial, because I mean, the truth of the matter is, even if we were to completely eliminate the world of all of the emissions and we were to go completely green, we would still need rural people. We would still need nature-based solutions, ancestral techniques, people who understand the biodiversity of their regions and protect it to be able to reach the goals that we made in Paris. So the administration understands that, we understand that, and I'm looking forward to collaborating in a way that's actually meaningful, because like the administrator said, it's not a photo op, and that's not what we do. We go in looking for tangible solutions and investment for the people that we care about the most.
April, if I may, just before you go, I just wanted to clarify, there is a time and a place for aid. We are human beings, we aid each other by nature, okay? But when it comes to Africa and strengthening relationships, I think the partnership-driven solutions where there's a beneficial teaching and learning is incredibly important here. It's way more important than the traditional models of aid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're absolutely right about that. From the time I was a child, my mother used to always regale me about how resource and mineral rich Africa was. But then when I began to do my work here in Washington, there's so much more. There's trade. There's also issues of national security. People don't realize how important the continent of Africa is to the world. It's not just about oil that we've heard about the infrastructure being built by China and some of these nations to extract oil and not really repaying, but now they're starting to do that, but and not just diamonds, but there are so many other things that Africa offers the world, the continent, not just each country. But with that said, what do you want Americans to take away from not just this trip with Secretary Regan, but just the whole focus this year on Africa? Because we don't always focus on Africa until there is an issue, a crescendo moment.
Well, I think, I'm sure you'd like to speak to that as well. But for me, really, is that there's an injustice there. It's inequitable. Like, climate change is inequitable. There are people who are neglected, who are forgotten, who help feed the world. I mean, just it's inexcusable. So for us, really, it is about fighting for and fighting with, most importantly, people whose voices deserve to be heard, people who deserve a seat at the table. And we'll do that every day.
Yeah, I think Sabrina brings up a good point. The injustice around, Sierra Leone, for example, has some of the oldest mangroves in the world. Okay, and we understand the importance of mangroves to the climate debate, but deforestation is a huge problem in Sierra Leone because people need the wood to cook food. Okay, and the mudslides, the obviously impact on the earth, the impact on communities is incredible. There are learnings and teachings we can do for each other to help communities like that, to help emerging and struggling countries to change their tactics. That's what the administrator and us have been really talking about, those metrics. What can we do? I'd love, Michael, for you to talk about that, because you've got some really key ideas there as well.
Yeah, I think, listen, I'm loving this conversation because it is a complex and layered conversation. I think that, April, I'm passionate about justice and equity and inclusion, and it doesn't just stop at the country's borders. And so as we look at the work that Idris and Sabrina are doing, just around cook stoves, the Cook Stoves initiative that we've had a relationship with Ghana for about a decade is focused on air quality benefits. But let's be honest about who's impacted the most. It's women and young girls who are suffering from that air pollution. So the exchange of ideas around technology not only advances the cooking technology and allows for us to look at different fuels so that we're not using deforestation techniques and mangroves to generate energy, but looking at alternative energy sources. There's a benefit to women and girls and technology that we have to really focus on. So we're talking about that technical exchange. Listen, we've got a group of historically Black colleges and universities that as a consortium will develop a formal partnership in Ghana and in Sierra Leone to see how we can continue that intellectual exchange at the highest levels as we combat the climate crisis, but think about economic development and technological solutions. So we're going to make a number of announcements next week that are not just going to be a flash in the pan. They're going to be serious investments. And it's all based on the president's leadership. We know that we can't solve our national security problems, our climate problems, our economic challenges if we don't have this globalized solution that the ELBAs and the EPA is working on.